I owe Doug Horn a deep appreciation for his unremitting, unrelenting commitment to this lecture. This is Doug Horn's lecture, in a sense.
Thank you.
And Doug is here, in case you didn't know. A closer look at the Zapruder film, A Case for Alteration. The title is from Bev Sadowski. Abraham Zapruder filmed the assassination, of course, as you all know. He was a wealthy dressmaker from Dallas, Texas. Come in, come in. His ancestors had come from Ukraine. My three grandparents also came from Ukraine. So did Tevye from Fiddler on the Roof. The film does not show a limo stop, but of course, some of us know that the limo stopped. Walter Cronkite said the car stopped momentarily. Bob Clark said it came to an immediate stop. Clark was an eyewitness. He was with the three camera cars following LBJ.
Let us recount this incident again. There has been an assassination attempt against the life of President John F. Kennedy in Dallas, Texas. The President, Mrs. Kennedy, and Governor Connally of Texas, en route from the Dallas airport to a speech the President was scheduled to make at noon in Dallas, were in the President's famed bubble-top car, driving through cheering crowds in the streets of Dallas when three shots rang out. The President slumped into the lap of Mrs. Kennedy, apparently a bullet wound in his head. Governor Connally slumped to the floor of the car. Bullet wounds were seen in his chest. Mrs. Kennedy screamed out, "Oh no!" The car stopped momentarily. Secret Servicemen unloaded their rifles and started into the crowd. Two persons, a man and a woman, were seen crouched with a crowd around them on a hilltop overlooking the road. Whether they were concerned in the shooting or not, we do not know yet. Secret Servicemen rushed to that scene, and we're waiting a report on that.
We heard the shots very clearly, but it was almost inconceivable at that stage that this was an assassination. About no more than 2 or 3 seconds elapsed before the car that the President was traveling. This was an open limousine that had been sent out from the White House fleet in Washington. This car came to an immediate stop. The Secret Service follow car. Some of the agents piled out, then almost immediately leaped back in. We saw one of them pull out a submachine gun. They leaped back into the car, and the motorcade took off very rapidly. It had just entered a throughway.
Let us recount this incident again. There has been an assassination attempt against...
If the film is authentic, the devoted followers of film authenticity need to answer at least 12 very difficult questions. I have never seen them do this. Number one, what happened to the limo stop? Vince Palomara has listed 72 witnesses who stated that the limo slowed or stopped. Number two, why does the film suggest only one headshot? We have a master list of 202 witnesses who indicated that JFK was shot from the right front. See Vince Palomara's book again. Number three, why did Clint Hill report a headshot after 3:13? As I approached the vehicle, there was a third shot. It hit the President in the head, upper right rear of the right ear, caused a gaping hole, but it already happened at 3:13. What's he talking about? 4, why do we not see the turn onto Elm Street? Zapruder claimed that he started filming when the limousine rounded the corner, and he had plenty of time in his film for this. The extant film is only about 6 feet long. whereas the physical film length is about 25 feet. His secretary agreed with him. Marilyn Sitzman, despite her name, was standing behind him to counteract his chronic vertigo. If the film is authentic, why did the Warren Commission drawings and data tables disagree with the film? Newsweek, 1993. This is taken from the Warren Commission data. Notice where the third shot is, the last shot. It's opposite the stairs to the grassy knoll. 313 is over here somewhere. If the film is authentic, why do early Secret Service reconstructions show a shot well past 313? Notice the red arrow here. This is the last shot. This is where 313 occurred. If the film is authentic, why does no promptly debriefed witness report a head snap? For example, Erwin Schwartz, Zapruder's partner, denied seeing a head snap in the film that weekend. If the film is authentic, why did both Dan Rather and Deke DeLoach see JFK's head go forward in copies of the film that weekend? So did Ike Alkins, who saw it in real time. Since 1963, why has no one reported a forward head movement in the film? Did you see JFK's head go forward? If the film is authentic, why does the Stemmons freeway sign show no pincushion effect? John Costella has shown that Zapruder's lens routinely stretched all images outward toward the four corners, but the Stemmons sign alone escapes these laws of optics. He concludes that the sign was inserted into the image after the film was developed. And this is the pincushion effect, which you can observe for yourself if you have good eyesight. If the film is authentic, why two compartmentalized NPIC events that weekend? The film was diverted from Life's office in Chicago to NPIC in Washington, D.C., arriving there that night, Saturday night. From there, it went to Rochester, where it spent most of Sunday, and then it went back to NPIC on Sunday night. After that, copies were then sent, possibly late Sunday night or early Monday morning, to Life in Chicago in time for the November 29th issue, which hit the newsstand on Tuesday. If the film is authentic, why did John Hicks, the NPIC director in 1975 during the Rockefeller Commission, overreact when he saw Brugioni's briefing boards from Saturday night? This is discussed in a minute here in an interview by Doug Horn with Brugioni. If the film is authentic, why did 72 of 75 Hollywood film experts agree that the black patch was a fake? We might also ask this: why does the black patch so closely match the white patch on the lateral X-ray films? If you still trust the government, Google Shane O'Sullivan's The Zapruder Mystery. It is 85 minutes long on YouTube. It has had 2.5 million views. How many of you are among that number? That's a good start. In November 2008, Sidney Wilkinson purchased a third-generation copy of the forensic version of the film from the archives. The original is called Generation Zero. This was a 35 millimeter film, duplicate negative, with no defects removed. So when you see this in a few seconds, you'll know that it's not what you usually see. No defects have been removed. She created digital files of each frame in 6K format. Each frame contained 114.7 megabytes. Compare this to a home HD TV with 1920 by 1080 pixels. That's called a 2K scan. So Sidney had nearly 12 times as much information in each frame as an HD TV. So the home HD TVs, computers, and movies use linear color space. All have had contrast and color balance adjusted to be pleasing to your eye. But Sidney scanned the logarithmic space, which means that all available information was retained. To a human eye, logarithmic color looks a bit muddy, but all the data is there, and that's what's important for analysis. And here, visually, you can see the difference between the 2K and 6K scans. Here is 317, and you can see the black patch at the back of JFK's head. You'll see it again. At NASA, one of the government scientists did a scan across JFK's black patch and did a similar scan across John Connolly's head. And that's an interesting comparison, of course, because it's on the same frame of the Zapruder film with the same lighting. And you can see in the scans how densely black JFK's head is on the upper one and how different, how natural John Connolly's looks. And here you see the black patch magnified. 321, 323, and then 313. In the video that you will see in an instant here, this image is the one discussed by Paul Rutan as he is interviewed by Sidney and Tom Wilkinson, her husband. Paul Rutan has been in the business since the 1950s and 60s, and these are some of his credentials. The second person in the video interview is Garrett Smith, and these are some of his credentials. Yes.
Paul's function.
Can't hear you.
What was Paul's function in the movie business? What was he, an editor, special effects guy, or
Film restoration.
Film restoration expert.
film? Okay, thank
Film restoration expert.
He'll explain. He grew up with OJT on all kinds of optical printers and all kinds of film duties, but he became.
Yeah, it'll be in the video in a second.
David, if I can, since we don't have a mic in the audience, if you could repeat any question, just so.
Thank you.
When I know it, what was asked.
Paul Rutan's career was in color, or well, I would say basically film restoration. I suppose it was mostly color, but that was his expertise. Of the 72 Hollywood experts who saw the black patch as a fake, these are the only two who would go on the record. They had not even met each other before. Doug Horn was in the room watching these digital frames with Ned Price, who was head of Warner Brothers Restoration in 2009. When he saw the black patch, he said, "Oh my God, I can't believe they made such a bad fake." That was precisely my own reaction when I saw the MPI image, first generation, at the 6th floor museum with Sidney Wilkinson. I nearly laughed out loud. My gifted daughter at age 7 would surely have done better than that. Now, Meredith is, of all things, a film editor in Hollywood. She is right here making a JFK documentary. Here's the video with Paul Rutan and Garrett Smith.
We've asked a lot of people to be involved in these studies with us, and we've asked them to go on camera, and the majority have refused. They're professionals. They sort of fear of possibly being lumped in as part of a whack job conspiracy thing, and they're afraid of what it might do to their credentials. Other reasons for withdrawal have been fear of the government coming back on them. Why are you guys here?
Because I believe in the truth. I believe in the truth, and I think the truth should be known, you know. But with all the stuff that's going on now, with the 50th anniversary, is anybody going to listen? You know?
So I think I did it because it felt like, as an American citizen, I can make a decision to make a truthful observation. Now, as to my credibility, 37 years in the movie business, I'm not sure how much lower than you can go than that. And then just got done with nearly 25 years at Paramount, where I basically ran their mastering for most of those years and spent the last few years investigating new digital production technology.
Been doing this since, I don't know, 1968. I was delivering film in New York City. And then full-time from 74, I got hired to work for my dad, and I worked for him for 12 years, started out as janitor and then shipping, then film cleaning, and then film repair, and then optical lineup, and then optical printing. So ever since then, you know, I've worked for a couple companies, set up a department at Compact Video, and I had my own company for 14 years doing restorations.
Do you see any signs of alteration?
Yes.
Where do you see them?
Well, and this explosion right here doesn't look, it's got defects on it, but it just doesn't look real. It doesn't look like blood. It just doesn't look real.
This is frame 317. This is what initially caught my eye as being out of character with the other shadows on the film.
Right.
We took that film and had it analyzed with imaging software. And I want to show you the results of that. On frame 317 here, if you look to the upper left-hand corner, you see a green line across the back of the president's head on frame 317.
Right.
The software is called line profile, and what it does is it shows the amount of black in the frame as a value going from left to right on the graph just to the right of that. So as you can see, it's nearly completely black.
Right, where here, is this an earlier frame?
That image was from the back of Governor Connolly's head on the same frame. So we have exactly the same lighting setup. The lighting situation is identical. And you can see with the profile, it has a more natural fall off as to what we would have if an object were lit by a single source like the sun.
Correct. I think you're looking at a patch, at a photographic patch that they put on the back of his head. It's crude, but if you run the film, you'll see that it moves differently than his head does as well. So it's an optical, some sort of an optical that they put on there to not show the back of his head.
In your opinion, what do you think would have been the most likely way this would have been accomplished?
With an optical printer, with an aerial optical printer.
What they call an aerial imaging machine?
Yes. Yes, aerial optical printer. Where they could create that patch as an overlay and lay it on there. It's just like old time optical special effects stuff.
And how long do you think that a process like this might have taken?
Overnight. Well, they did have optical printers for 8mm because they would take 8mm and blow it up to 16mm. So they did have that capability at that time. I have 8mm gates myself.
Now, I want to show you one other bit of research that we've done that's come up, and this is new. This is the first time anybody's seen this, and we wanted to share it with you. What I've done is, using the same software, I was able to evaluate the back of the president's head in a number of frames here. We have a couple of frames before he is hit by the bullet in the head, and a couple of frames after. Now, in this instance, the white line you see over the president's head is, on the graph on the left, represented by the color component of the three colors, the red, green, and blue, in that area where the line is there. So as you can see there, they're pretty much distinct red, green, and blue. I believe this is because we're looking at the grains of Kodachrome as we go across, and they're loosely separated here. That's frame 308. Here's frame 310. Again, we have this same area of separation of the colors, where there is a fair amount of color within that black, what appears to be black area. When we go to frame 317
Oh, yeah.
and 321 and 323.
Even without looking at the graph, you can tell by the picture that it's dramatically different. You know, my opinion is that it's an overlay that they did that's black. So it doesn't have the effect of the sun on his hair, which is where you're getting your color separation.
Okay, Paul, we're looking here now at frame 317. This is the one that first caught my interest as having something wrong.
Well, the only thing I can see really is how predominant that black patch is in this particular frame. I mean, it's clear to me that is not the back of his head, that is some kind of a optical effect that has been laid on the back of his head by an optical house. And this is also an optical effect. But the back of his head is what I'm always drawn to, because it's almost like he's wearing a tube, because there's the top of his head. And that's basically the color that it should be. And then it's black. It's just solid black.
You know, the density doesn't match the shoulders don't match that, and doesn't match the top of the head. So it looks to me like somewhere in here, somebody did a hold back and let through mat, or essentially blocked in a part of the area in an in-between thing, in-between generation, and then made a film copy. So you've got some grain structure over the superimposed element that is consistent with the rest of the frame, but you've got an irregular shaped, I don't know if you'd call that a trapezoid, but you've got an irregular shape superimposed over the head, where the density values that from the hair that we saw in that previous frame are completely different, very noticeable. But if what you're telling me is this, a real scientist, a real image scientist, has evaluated it, and these are sections of the same frame taken on the same moment in time in the same planet, and similar enough hair color. If you look at the top of Connolly's head and the top of Kennedy's head, but that clearly shows it to me that something has been added to that frame. That's what it looks like to me. It just seems really obvious that the frames where they've matted out the back of the head and added in the pink splash, the pink water balloon, whatever it is, it's supposed to be the blood. It's just not even believable as possible. I mean, maybe nearly 50 years ago, that might have passed muster, but for anybody, I mean, my impression is if I showed it to a 12-year-old kid, they would say it was a cartoon. Because they wouldn't know who Kennedy was. They wouldn't know anything about it. And I said, well, what do you think of that guy getting shot? And they would go, that's not real.
So I think 50 years ago, it was perfectly believable. As today, with this major blow up that we've made and the 6K scan, the faults are very apparent. They'd be apparent as wires and stuff in Star Wars that they redid, But, from every time I look at it, it's hard for me to look at because it's not real.
We've got 50 years of technology absorption. I mean, we now carry phones that are more evolved than Dick Tracy's wrist TV and the comic books that were around this time that I was reading when this happened. And so I think Paul made the point is that this was good enough for broadcast TV in 50 years ago. I do have a feeling, a very strong feeling that at the time this was part of the theater of government theater. Somebody had an agenda to whatever that agenda was. They obviously doctored this film. And how many movies, documentaries have been made about it, yet nothing ever gets done. On the other hand, along with those Dick Tracy type devices that we also have the internet, and we have the ability to reach more people across the globe instantaneous. So maybe I don't know what facts I can draw other than that film looks like it was doctored. I don't know why. I don't know who, but it seems really obvious.
So, it depends on basically the perception of the people today. If you can get off of YouTube and get off of Facebook and actually pay attention to something like this,
The head explosion that's in the existing film? There's only one frame in the film
This is Dino
that shows with
Gioni,
any graphic violence the head explosion where there's any red
reviewed
mist or
by
blood.
I
Doug
remember
Horn, and we'll tell you more
that
about Dino
shocked
in a
all
bit.
of us when we saw it. I thought it was.
This is frame 313 of the extant film.
I thought I remembered a chunk of head here, and this was misty, bigger.
How far would you say the mist or the explosion was above his head in real terms? How many inches or how many feet above his head?
I'd say about 1.5 feet. And it was high. It was above. It was this way.
It was high.
Yeah.
Would you call this high or low? What would you call this? I can enlarge
No,
this.
no.
Let me do that.
The way I saw it, the section was like that.
No, I can enlarge this even more.
No, I saw much more than that.
Much more than that.
It'd be about like up here.
Did it hang in the air for a moment? Or?
Well, you should be. You say there's not another frame? There
No,
should.
I'll show you now the adjacent frames on either side. This is the only frame that shows any red color or blood or anything that's apparently.
No, what I remember was something. It was white, and then there was a white mist around.
Mm-hmm.
I think it froze. Is our IT man here?
I should back it up one slide.
We can try that.
I thought it skipped a couple of slides too. We're going to explain who he was before we showed those. I think it skipped.
Yeah, it's totally dead.
The head explosion that's in the existing film. There's only one frame in the film that shows with any graphic violence the head explosion where there's any red mist or blood.
Oh, I remember it. That shocked all of us when we saw it. I thought it was.
This is frame 313 of the extant film.
I thought I remembered a chunk of head here, and this was misty, bigger.
How far would you say the mist or the explosion was above his head in real terms? How many inches or how many feet above his head?
I'd say about 1.5 feet. It was high. It was above. It was this way.
It was high.
Yeah.
Would you call this high or low? What would you call this? I can enlarge
No,
this. Let me do that.
The way I saw it, the section was like that.
No, I can enlarge this even more.
No, I saw much more than that.
Much more than that.
Mm-hmm. Be about like up here.
Did it hang in the air for a moment? Or?
Well, you should be. You say there's not another frame? There
No, I'll show you now the adjacent frames on either side. This is the only frame that shows any red color or blood or anything that's apparently.
No, what I remember was something. It was white, and then there was a white mist around.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you advance it to the next slide?
We'll see if we can.
That doesn't look right.
Have we seen this?
I don't think it does either, but I'm not a photo analyst, and you were for decades. So your opinion is of great interest to us. Have you ever seen a shadow on somebody's head that had straight edges like that?
No, not with hair. See, here's an example right there. Mm-hmm. You know, that's an anomaly. I don't know what.
I would agree that it's an anomaly and one that's unexplained. Do you remember seeing anything like this in the film you examined?
No, I just remember the white ball. I thought it was like a white ball in the air right over his head.
Would you hold the pointer about how high it went in the air?
About where my pointer is.
Mm-hmm. There are two other frames with very, very black patches or anomalies on the back of the head, and I'd like to show them to you. This is frame 321. It's just 4 frames later. And a lot of people think that's rather peculiar looking.
Now, what I would do, I would impose his head over this, see what comes out.
Mm-hmm. Does this trouble you the way it troubles me?
This troubles me right here.
Yeah, this should be his jaw and his neck. I don't understand why it's black like this. 2 frames later, frame 323 is a similar appearance. And once again, the area that's unusually dark is the area where the people at Parkland Hospital said the wound in the president's head was, in the back of his head.
Yeah, you don't see any indication of a different. Now, if you had a densitometer, that's what you'd do. You'd see the density, see if you can get some density out of that.
And you'd want to use that on the actual film, is that right?
No, you could use it on the photo.
Oh, okay. On this?
Yeah.
And that's it. That's the only frame. There's the anomaly in frame 317.
Yeah.
They have a close-up which shows it very clearly. Even in linear color, you can still see it, which I'll show you in a moment.
What do they say?
Who's they?
You said they had looked at it.
Oh, no. This version of the film made by the LMH company in 1998 clearly shows this black trapezoid. When we view the close-up, which we can do now, if you'd like. Would you like Let me ask you the big question, Dino. Do you think that this film you're watching now, you can watch Clint Hill here, do you think this is the film that you watched on Saturday night, November 23rd?
I watched a good quality film, that's for sure. I don't know. I thought the blast of the head lasted longer, and now I think that here, I'm amazed at the quality here. This is good.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see it that clear, but I did see this, and I did see. I saw the. I thought I saw the white glob in the air higher, and there was a mist. I don't know. Sometimes I just have a feeling that something has been cut out of this. You know, the killing.
Regarding the head explosion?
Yeah.
Does it appear too brief to you? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
What struck me about the Paul Rutan interview.
That wasn't the end of it.
Oh, it wasn't? Let's see if we can go back.
It gets better after that. Start playing that part.
Well, that's too much.
And that's it. Showing in 317.
I don't know if I have the capability technically of advancing within this frame.
So it just advanced too fast on its own.
Yeah. Do you want to take a second to describe what was supposed to be in there?
Yeah, we're sorry for the difficulties because we thought we tested this yesterday. Anyway, those are computers for you. He then states that there are frames missing from the film, states it definitively. He then states that the white blob of biological material, I'm sure it was brain tissue, hanging in the air, had a big cloud of white mist about it. And I said, "Are you sure it was white?" And he says, "Yeah." And I said, "Was it red or a bloody color?" And he says, "No." And I said, "Are you sure about that?" And he says, "Yeah." And I said, "How sure are you that there are missing frames and that the head explosion you saw was much larger? How sure are you on a scale of 10? And he says 10.
Thank you, Doug. What struck me about Paul Rutan's interview was that he said the black patch moved independently of JFK's head. How is that possible? According to Wikipedia, even after retirement, Ruggioni was considered to be the world's foremost imagery intelligence analyst. Wiki states that Dino considers the extant film to be altered. Wikipedia. He and Arthur Lundahl co-founded the NPIC. Via the U2 images, he identified the Cuban missiles. He was NPIC's chief information officer, that is the briefing board czar. He prepared the Cuban missile boards for JFK. And he was one of the first historians to present photographic evidence of Auschwitz. These are two of his books. Photo fakery? What does he know about photo fakery? Two Secret Service agents agreed with Dino. Bill Carter reports on the raw footage of the Zapruder film as shown to him by the Secret Service. The portion that was so graphic had been cut out. Marty Venker, from his memoir, that's the Secret Service, showed you the gruesome version of the Zapruder film during training that the public usually didn't see, where parts of President Kennedy's brain sprayed all over Jackie. Here are images provided by Doug Miser. His poster board is right there. You can look at it at your leisure, but you can see on the right that Hawkeye Works in Rochester forgot to cover this up. This is an authentic occipital wound. From Doug Miser again, 369. There it is again. Look at the poster board for more detail. There's also a fake cheek wound here. Roderick Ryan, a Hollywood Technical Award winner, told Noel Twyman that he agreed. The globule on JFK's cheek is a fake. It was not seen at Parkland. So who washed this off of JFK's face before he got into the ER? The MPI images at the 6th floor were donated about December 30th, 1999. They were received in January 2000 per the Dallas Morning News. They are first generation copies. These are the ones that Sydney and I saw. In late November 2009, Horn published Inside the ARRB, and this contained an image of the black patch in black and white. On November 20th, Sydney and I viewed the MPI images. It is our impression that no public person had viewed these images before Sydney and I did. And we saw two different sets of images. Sitting together with Gary Mack, Sydney and I saw extremely high resolution first generation images. We were both stunned by the trapezoidal black patch with sharp edges, sharper than what you have seen here today by clear margins. A year later, with her husband, Wilkinson sees a clearly different set of film images, similar to those in the public domain, like those you saw already. She is extremely distraught when she calls me about this. 2 years later, I have the same experience with Peter Janney. I pointedly asked Megan Bryant if these were the same images that we had seen in 2009. She assured me that they were. Gary Mack was absent that day, perhaps for good reason. He died 3 years later at age 68. So how is this done? The original film was first loaded in a projector, bounced off a mirror, then passed through a clear cell. The image is first loaded here, projected and bounced off a mirror, and then it passes through a clear cell. But on the clear cell, you can see the original image. On the clear cell, then you can add whatever you like to the image. It is then photographed by a camera. The device that does this is an aerial optical printer shown here. These special effects are discussed extensively in Raymond Fielding's wonderful book. That summer, Mary Poppins was filmed, and you can see the cartoon characters that were inserted into the Hollywood film there. So the provenance of the film is this. It was diverted from life to NPIC. Ruggioni saw an 8mm film on Saturday night. They had to go downtown late at night to find a projector, an 8mm projector, because they didn't have one at NPIC. He remembers that. The film then went to Rochester, New York, at Kodak. It was altered at Kodak via Hawkeye Works within 12 hours on that Sunday. And then late that night, it returns to NPIC, where McMahon and Hunter see a 16mm wide film. How does it go from 8 to 16 millimeters? Do you all know how to do that? Nobody in Hollywood does. Copies were sent to life and then displayed in the November 29th issue. If you want to read the transcript of the Rutan Smith interview, all you have to do is buy Jacob's book. Wave it around, Jacob, if you would. Take a look back there. There's Jacob, who wrote the book. The Bell & Howell Model 414 held 16mm film. which was first run in one direction with half of the width of the film exposed. The reel would then have to be removed from the camera in subdued light. The feed and take-up reels were then swapped and reloaded so that the second half could be exposed. There was no audio.
Has anyone seen the A side of the original?
We're coming to that. Hold on. 16 millimeter Kodachrome 2 has two sides, the A and B sides. Along the edge are the edge prints shown by the yellow arrow. These become very important. After exposure, the film is developed, and then it is slit down the middle, like along the blue line, spliced together, and a 4-foot leader is attached. Here's a quote from Doug. Zapruder only said that the edge print was consistent with authenticity, that is, that it was exposed on Kodachrome 2 film manufactured in 1961. The edge print indicated that it was indeed developed in Dallas. The ARRB did not ask him to analyze image content beyond the ghost images in the inner sprocket area because that was outside of his expertise. He was a film chemist, not a special effects man. In fact, Zapruder once asked Leo Zahn, my Rancho Mirage neighbor and professional film editor, how alterations might have been done. Zapruder was beholden to Kodak for his pension. He needed the funds to keep flying his private plane. He admitted that copying showed tremendously effective retention of resolution through many generations. This would make it more difficult to discriminate between generations 0 and 1. Even the director of the NPIC Color Lab, Homer McMahon, who saw the altered copy, thought it was the original. Zapruder initially admitted in print that the film and all 3 copies had been split to 8 millimeter at Kodak in Dallas. For this, he relied on the firsthand eyewitness testimony of the 2 ranking Kodak officials, Phil Chamberlain and Tom Nelty. Zapruder later reversed his opinion and threw both of these men under the bus. On the other hand, the 6th floor museum received 3 unslit 16 millimeter copies in January 2000. Where did they come from? On July 24th, 1997, I asked Bruce Jameson, who did the copying of the films, in a telephone call whether a copy film could be distinguished from the original without a side-by-side comparison. And his response was that it would be difficult. Zapruder also noted that the first 60 batches of Kodachrome 2, which was used in Zapruder's camera that day, were especially notable for its lower contrast and longer exposure latitude. Detection of a copy, therefore, would be even more difficult. These are extractions from, or excerpts directly from the Zapruder report. The original film was slit to 8 millimeter, and it was projected by Mr. Chamberlain once or twice. This is Chamberlain's personal memoir. This is directly from the Zapruder report. The film was slit and put on a regular 8 millimeter projection spool. Footnote, in mid-1997, when I was questioning Bruce Jameson, there was some question as to whether any of the copies were slit, but I am almost positive that we viewed it as stated here. Harry Livingston interviewed Raleigh Zapruder. This is a very long, astonishing, and sometimes disheartening interview, disheartening for Raleigh. Anyone seriously interested in film authenticity should not even claim to have an opinion until you read this interview. In Murder in Dealey Plaza, I have also commented extensively on the film maps. On the other hand, the high priests of film authenticity never comment on these detailed and technical film maps. We have no idea whether they have even examined this evidence. The original home movie segment has vanished. Only copies remain. By itself, this raises a question about the location of the original motorcade sequence. Many of us believe that it is also missing. Routine Kodak practice was to punch an ID number at the end of the second side. In this case, on the extant film, the number 0183 should appear after the motorcade sequence. It does not. The Zapruder report reminds us that the original was processed without removing the initial 4-foot leader, but this 4-foot leader is seen in neither the extant film nor in Secret Service copy number 2. In the center here is the extant Zapruder film surrounded by 2 copies. In the Zapruder report, it clearly said the difference in density is significant, more than one would expect. In Harry Livingston's interview with Jameson said about the copies, "It can't be mine because we use the same exposure on all 3 prints." Here's the home movie sequence, a copy, not the original. The red arrow identifies a head in the intersprocket area. In the motorcade sequence in the 3 copies, all intersprocket areas are totally black. So why do we have intersprocket images here, but not in the motorcade sequence? Robert Colley, who operated the Jameson machine, and USC professor Herb Farmer both have indicated that the motorcade side of the first day original copies should contain intersprocket images, but there are none. C.D. Jackson bought the Z film for life. In 1952, he was the liaison between the newly created CIA and the Pentagon. Another Fox CIA officer, George Joannides, served as the liaison for the HSCA. So why was Brugione kept out of the loop? He tells us, "I was too honest to be part of a scheme." The edge prints, that is Kodak's safety film, appeared at regular intervals on the edge of the film, as I showed you. A copied film should show both the original edge prints and those from the copy film. 2 such sets would clearly imply that this was a copy. So, all edge prints had to be removed from the film that was copied at Hawkeye Works, where we'd all know. By removing multiple frames in sequence, which is what they would have to do, this left speed glitches at regular intervals throughout the film, and these can be identified. One of them occurred when JFK's backward head movement, which was thereby unavoidably turned into a head snap. So the population density under this government bus was even greater than Nazareth during the Nativity. Here are people who lived under the bus. All the Parkland doctors. I would put John Ebersol there, and I would even put the 3 pathologists there. I think they were thrown under the bus too. Galileo's enemies refused to look through his telescope at the moons of Jupiter. Galileo was finally cleared of heresy by the church on October 30th, 1992. Today, we have high priests of the film who will not examine Wilkinson's 6K images. One of these 2 priests has never even asked to see these images. The other priest was offered free transportation and housing, but later declined due to health reasons. He didn't know I was a doctor. If you really want to have your minds blown, read this book. William Colby, director of the CIA, using his insider status as a devout Catholic, is also infamous for planting microphones throughout the papal apartments. How many of you knew this? I don't see any hands. This listening did not stop until 1984. This is an ancient tradition, though, the blind leading the blind. Abiding in the midst of ignorance, thinking themselves wise and learned, fools go aimlessly hither and thither like blind led by the blind. 800 BC. Planck's principle still applies. Max Planck was the founding father of quantum mechanics. A new scientific truth does not triumph by convincing its opponents and making them see the light, but rather because its opponents eventually die. And a new generation grows up that is familiar with it. As a reminder for me, this coin is displayed on my bookshelf at home. Max Planck. Mark Twain agrees. The glory which is built upon a lie becomes a most unpleasant encumbrance. How easy it is to make people believe a lie, and how hard it is to undo that work again. If you want to read about Sydney's experience and mine at the museum, the essay is in my hardcover book, which can also be purchased online on Kindle for less than $10. In 2 weeks, you can all watch this new documentary in French, but with English subtitles. It is an hour long, builds on the work of Douglas Horne, and focuses on the chain of custody of the film. The title is in the label at the top, Image 313.
Is that link going to be posted anywhere on any?
What do you say, Doug?
It's posted, the first part.
You go back.
Yes.
Back it up, Doug. Show it again.
I don't know. Oh, this, okay. This film was only posted on YouTube about a month ago. I didn't know anything about it. Jacob brought it to my attention. I found this first cut to be about 98% correct. It's about the chain of custody problem the weekend of the assassination. It's a crucial piece of work. I contacted the filmmaker in France. I sent him 1 million corrections to his English subtitles. He thanked me for that. He's made those corrections. So you can watch the first cut of this film now on YouTube. And I published a blog article about it also, about Image 313 on my blog site about a week ago. So in about 2 or 3 weeks, he's going to put the second edit up, and it's going to have all the Hollywood scans in it and the Dino footage, which will play properly, I promise, because I've tested it already. So it's an amazing guy, Yannick Rolando. He's done amazing work all on his own. I didn't know anything about it until I viewed it. Thank you.
In a few weeks, our new book will be out. I'm showing it on my laptop because the cover has just changed. But anyway, it should be available on Amazon and perhaps through a private printer. I'm not quite sure how my co-author has worked out all the details. This book will have nothing essential on the Zapruder film. So you have been a very fortunate audience. Thank you for your attention.
What's the?
It's right here. Final analysis.
Hey, maybe your 20/20 eyesight can see that, but.
I've had three cataract surgeries and LASIK, so I have no problem seeing.
Like an optical, that's hold this up.
Yeah. By all means, go ahead.
So Jacob Hornberger held up his book, and the value is he's got 5 chapters on alteration of the film. How was it done? And David asked me to bring this. Now, this came out in 2009, but it's volume 4 of my book. And there's a chapter on the Zapruder film. It's kind of a monster. It's almost 200 pages long. But let me tell you, it's dense reading, but you'll learn a lot if you read it. You'll learn all about Dino Brigioni and the chain of custody problem and other issues concerning the film. So thank you, David. My book,
Inside the ARRB.
volume 4.
You shouldn't be in this case unless you read this. Now, I'd like Andy Kiel to come here and tell us a little bit about the camera.
Well, it's more or less about the Zapruder film itself. Is that I went through the actual statements that Zapruder made December 9th, 1963, and he states he began filming when the motorcade turned from Houston on Elm. He never took his finger off maximum zoom lens, which means there should be no gap. It should be continuous. Then in his Warren Commission testimony, he's only shown the photographs from the Zapruder film. And constantly he says in that particular statement that this is not correct. this is not what I saw. This doesn't look right. And then 5-6 years later, Clay Shaw trial, 69, he actually dies in 1970, never has his film again after he gives those up that weekend, by the way. He says the same thing when the film is actually moving in the Clay Shaw trial. Obviously, Warren Commission is still photos. But in the Clay Shaw trial, he says, this is not right. The shooting didn't take place at this particular location. And Liebler and I forget the actual attorney during the Shaw trial are basically, yeah, they're basically pushing him to say, you know, is this the film? And he goes, well, I can't say for sure because there might be frames missing here and there, which is familiar because if you look at the Mark Lane interview with Orville Nix, he says very clearly that the frames are missing from his film. Of course, his camera was damaged by the FBI. And of course, we know that Hoover admits in 1966 there were printing errors, frames were destroyed and reversed. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit tomorrow when I talk about Hoover and Johnson in the African room at 11:15. So a little plug for that. But yeah, so the film itself by Zapruder is not the one he actually saw.
Gail Nix Jackson, the granddaughter of Nix, has recently brought a lawsuit. A second lawsuit. Speaking of people who didn't agree what was in the film, Jackie Kennedy said, "That's not what I saw."
The name of the Shane O'Sullivan film.
Yeah.
Mystery of the
The Zapruder film.
Oh, sorry. The Zapruder Film Mystery, Shane O'Sullivan documentary. Question in the back? So you agree with all of this? Give us your name. I didn't quite hear all that. Your first name is Dave? Greg Adams and Dave Lentz. Yeah.